Hello, thank you for checking in. This is Andy Nguyen, and this is the first episode of the Millennial Up podcast. I am your host, Andy Nguyen, a millennial, get it, the host of the show. And I wanted to have a little introductory episode for what I hope to be a series of podcasts diving into the struggles, professionally, emotionally, mentally, that a millennial goes through in this day and age, and maybe provide some tips and tricks that I can, share by accessing my network of peers and friends that have either gone through the process already or going through the process like myself. I find that the best person to teach and the best person to share is someone that's going through it. Those who have already gone through it years ago, they become disconnected, and it's hard for them to empathize with the struggle that someone is going through on the day-to-day. I wanted to introduce myself because I'm going to be the driving force of this podcast, and it'd be good for all the listeners to really get an understanding of where I come from and how that relates to the story that I'm trying to tell. I grew up in Orange County. I grew up in Garden Grove, actually. Not the nicest part of Orange County. When you see the OC on that show is wildly exaggerated. I lived in the not so nice parts. It wasn't the worst, but it wasn't the best. It would be on the lower end of the spectrum. On a day-to-day, there was a lot of bullying, but there's also a lot of gang activity and crime in the area. I just grew up accustomed to that. I grew up in a typical Asian household. I was lucky in that my parents didn't force me into becoming a doctor or an engineer or a lawyer. I ended up just deciding that for myself. And back to mention the bullying, I grew up kind of overweight and I moved around a lot from school to school, so I struggled making friends. I always felt like I had low self-esteem because people would make fun of me. I was the butt part of jokes, and people would manipulate me just for the hell of it. I was tricked into thinking that someone liked me or wanted to be my friend just to be cast aside and everyone pointed and laughed. In those TV shows, that actually happened to me. Through that process, I struggled to try to find my identity, and I didn't believe that I could get to where I wanted to get by just truly being myself, as in staying that kind of unkept, chubby, not outgoing individual. So I kind of assimilated a bit. I asked my aunt to help me get treatment for my teeth, to get some braces. I asked my mom to talk to the doctor, see if I can get contacts. And I started exercising because I wanted to become a break dancer, but I was overweight, so I couldn't really do that just yet. I joined the hardest sports I could and just pushed through it. I was the fat kid, and people thought I was just out there to do the sport that the fat kids did, but I tried to keep up with the athletic kids. I couldn't ever really keep up, but I tried my best. I ended up becoming varsity captain of some sports, not by merit, but just by sheer hard work, which is, I guess, merit in a way, and dedication. I ended up losing a lot of weight and kind of found my identity. After I lost some weight, got my glasses, got my braces, straightened out my teeth, I had some confidence, enough confidence to kind of make it through the next few years. Once I got through college, I was more comfortable being myself and striving for the things that I wanted to do. I was less focused on what people thought about me. I still thought about it from time to time, but I really kind of grew into my identity at that point. I focused on hard work and dedication to getting to your goals. I wanted to be a great example for others, so I wanted to be the perfect example, perfect role model. Never faltered, didn't do drugs, didn't drink until I was 21. I always studied, went to the office hours of the TA. The professors knew me by my first name. The whole deal. I was basically the ideal Asian son. And with that, I was able to get a lot of career opportunities after I graduated. I did a few internships because I knew that was what you're supposed to do. So I gave up my summers either working at the school full-time or doing internships out in LA or Irvine or wherever I could find them. So I came out of college feeling pretty good about myself. I had focused on my studies. I had decent enough grades. It was really hard to get those grades, but I was able to get good enough grades to get to good engineering firms, to do internships, to be able to get other jobs. And I was on the right track. I had multiple job offers when I came out of college and didn't really struggle to find a job. So I never had that kind of stress. When you graduate, you don't know what you're going to do, and the job offers aren't coming in. Everyone wants you to have experience. To get experience, like your first job, you need to have multiple years of experience. And you're like, how am I supposed to get the first job if the first job requires experience? That whole thing. Luckily, I didn't have to deal with that because I had a good chance to get an internship without prior experience. So once I got to my first job, everything was fine and dandy, I got to my dream job. It was a firm that I believed in and had a great name, and I had a lot of opportunity to grow as long as I stuck with the company and kind of assimilated to the culture and worked hard. I thought that if you just worked hard and you focused on building relationships and you were reliable, you showed up on time, and you did all your work before you went home and you weren't the first one to leave, that everything would be fine and dandy. After a year and a half, I found out that wasn't the case. I myself was fired from my first job, my first engineering job. I had been fired from jobs before for reasons I won't be getting into in this episode, but it was kind of a jarring experience to do everything right from high school, study to get into a good school, got into a good school, did everything I needed to do to get to good internships, to get the good names on my resume, and then get the good jobs after college. And I was actually pushed out the door at my first job, and I had to really reevaluate who I was, where I was, what I was doing. It was a difficult time, to say the least. It made me really think about the true reality of work, like job security. I don't know if that exists. I'm in engineering, which is supposed to be a field where you're not going to struggle to find a job. Everyone always needs engineers. But here I am, off on my butt, unemployed, less than 2 years out of school. I considered finding a job at Starbucks or finding something in the meantime. And to get to that kind of place, it was so strange to think that I could have done everything right and ended up here. So through that process, I luckily had enough relationships, and I tapped into my network, spoke to friends, peers, old professors to see if they can find me a job, and I was able to find a job with only a few weeks of being unemployed. So I jumped to the next job. I struggled there too. I had a lot of personality issues with my manager. And at this point, I was just kind of relieved and blessed to have any kind of job. So I just put my head down, worked hard, and just kind of dealt with it. I dealt with a lot of things that I personally believe that I shouldn't have had to deal with. But in the professional world, it's kind of strange because it's not really supported for you to speak out loud about to your bosses. The human resources manager is actually there to protect the company. You may think they're there to protect you, but that's not always the case. They may be there as a resource for you, but at the end of the day, they are an employee of the company. So I'm always a little bit hesitant to fully divulge the experiences I have with the human resources manager. So after going through that process, I started realizing that working isn't as straightforward as it seemed. These things that I'm going through, these things that I'm thinking, and these things that I'm feeling were not things that people shared with me, that these were not things that I was taught in school. So I started really kind of taking notes and kind of analyzing, which is something I do all the time. I analyze. So I started realizing that I was feeling a lot, so I started sharing them. I started telling people, hey, I'm feeling this. And to my surprise, people were telling me, oh my God, I'm feeling that too. I have not had anyone to talk about it with. And I realized that I was not alone in these struggles. I was not alone in these problems. And there were people out there that we're feeling the same thing. But it's strange because you go talk to your friends and your family and people on social media, you're just like, their lives are so perfect, there's nothing wrong. So why would I tell them my sorrows if their lives are so perfect? They wouldn't understand. And we're so wrapped up in keeping this perfect persona online or to other people, even in person, that we don't speak freely, truly, and honestly. And that's what I'm about. I want to use this platform that I'm trying to build to speak honestly, truly, and connect with people that are struggling through the same things, to bring millennials up together. And there are things such as pushing forward for your professional development or preparing for your future, like investments and retirement accounts and all that. And then there's just the day-to-day emotional struggles, and a few topics that I plan on discussing in this podcast are the following. The first one would be the impostor syndrome, the idea that you feel like you're not valid enough or you're not enough of a blank to be working where you work or to be in the group that you're with. You feel like you're an imposter, that you're not the same level as everyone else. The lack of preparedness, the practical advice I just had mentioned, like investing, adulting, as some would say, and just some tips and tricks on how to survive the corporate world if that's the route that you choose to take. There's keeping up with the Joneses, like on social media, how to deal with that on a day-to-day, because social media is this crazy jungle where we're all fighting for likes and shares and comments. So we're trying to one-up each other, do crazy things or buy fancy things or go on really beautiful vacations. But what does it all mean in the end? What's important? Do you need to keep up with the Joneses, or do you need to find the things that give you purpose? Now there is, like I mentioned, the social media. Every social media timeline or account is a highlight reel. People only post the best things and they hide the worst things. So when others see each other's timelines and they think, oh, this is their entire life, that's not true. We just don't share the less pretty, ugly aspects of our lives. But people do forget that those parts still exist and people still experience them. Along with social media, the disconnect from human connection. A lot of my friends these days, I connect with them online, and it's great to be able to keep connections and talk to my friends from farther places. But when it's become so common to have full conversations online and never see my friends, that lack of human connection can affect a person. I have gotten to the point where if someone wants to talk to me on the street randomly, I go into a full conversation. I get an emotional connection that I don't get from communicating online. And I feel kind of weird sometimes just keep continuing the conversation because I haven't had that kind of connection in so long. I want to discuss mental health. I'm considering going through some therapy or talk to someone about the things that I go through on a day-to-day. I have issues mentally with my image, with how I view money and how I process information and how I overthink or don't think enough, and just things that are causing my brain to not function properly. And for me, a symptom of not functioning properly is how I keep forgetting things and forgetting where things are seconds after I touch it. So it's been getting to that point, and I'm a little bit worried, So I might be going to talk to someone because it's important. And there's living your life versus your parents' life. For me, my dad doesn't force anything upon me, but I am concerned. I don't want to disappoint my parents, and I want to be able to take care of them, but at the same time, I have my own life to live. And growing up in an Asian household, it's hard to make that decision. For me, my dad doesn't have enough money in his savings account to retire. So do I just forget about that and just let him fend for himself? Or should I be the dutiful Asian son and send him money? I'm trying to figure out the balance for that, so I don't kind of go too far one way or too far the other way. But those are the kinds of topics I want to bring to this show, and There's going to be a YouTube component. I'll be recording these episodes as well as podcasts on iTunes and Spotify as soon as I figure out how to upload it. But I hope that this community is something that benefits people, because I want there to be a safe place, or a place for people to get information about things that other people are not willing to talk about. I don't fear the discussion of things that seem taboo. I'd rather that everyone speaks and freely and shares their experiences so that others can maybe experience less of the hardships and mishaps. But thank you for listening and watching wherever you are consuming this content, and check in again maybe in a week or two for the next episode. I'll be sharing it on my Facebook group, Millennial Up, on Facebook. My Instagram channel is Andy V Nguyen. That is Nguyen. All the links will be below. My YouTube channel, which is the same, Andy V Nguyen. I'll be linking those all below. Connect with me on those channels so you can keep up with this content. And feel free to message me anytime if you want to talk about these topics, or if you want to be on the show. I will be bringing others onto the show, remotely or in person. But thank you for watching. Thanks.